Cool. All right, so
America has to roll it.
Okay, so hi everybody, we are Team 2, and for today's presentation we're going to be presenting about Ecuador, specifically about their interest rates and how they are affecting the country. So this is a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about, and now I'm going to hand it over to Serena, who's going to start us off with the history of Ecuador.
Well, founded in 1830, Ecuador is currently the 8th largest economy in Latin America. However, the country has been through a economic turmoil since the early 2000s, where the country decided to deprecate their local currency and adopt the US dollars. This action caused the economic has yet to recover from. This change causing a banking crisis. Although having the US dollar as the national currency helped them to reduce the risk of having a negative economic effect. However, one of the biggest issues of Ecuadorian economy is because of corruption. According to data from the anti-corruption department in the country, there is around $600 billion of the money is misspent through the government spending of their ex-president, which is Korea.
All right, so we're gonna follow that up with a current snapshot of the economy today. So as you can see, Ecuador's GDP is at 109 billion. That's kind of at the top of a general uptrend we've seen of late. This GDP today is mostly pushed by probably the one healthy sign of Ecuador's economy right now, which is their trade surplus. That's because if you may not know, Ecuador is largely an exporting economy. So they focus on their oil exports and also bananas, the largest banana and plantain exporter in the world. Their biggest export and import partner is the United States. Now, if you're looking at the unemployment and employment statistics, some of you might be like, how does that add up? The thing is, there's been so much corruption and instability in Ecuador of late that there's a huge informal economy within the country. So there's a lot of people working under the table, so to speak. So it's likely that these employment statistics as well as the GDP are inaccurate, perhaps understated. The other thing is Ecuador's dollarized, follows the US dollar currency, so they can't control exchange rates. And in addition to that, they recently struck a deal with the IMF for $4 billion in help. But the IMF requires them to reduce fiscal deficit at a pretty quick rate. So that has forced them to focus mostly on fiscal policy as opposed to monetary policy in response to economic stimuli. The problem with that is it's been a lot of short-term solutions. The government does a lot of infrastructure spending on projects that boosts employment for a short period. Once that's done, unemployment starts going back up. And the thing is, she mentioned the $600 million kind of getting scalped off the top. The problem with that is that leaves the government in a very vulnerable position because the resources are so drained by the end of it, they have to raise taxes again, more fiscal policy, more suppression of spending. And because that suppression of spending, they've gotten to deflation. And all of this adds up to this hugely unstable environment, which is why if you're a foreign investor, you just don't want to go there right now. So you can see the year-on-year drop in the last period has been pretty significant. So that's Ecuador right now in a nutshell.
Yeah, so in Ecuador, they categorize their interest rates from active and passive. So essentially in the active interest rates, financial institutions charge when they issue their credits. And on the other hand, in passive interest rates, they pay the people for their trust and also from when they deposit their money. So when we subtract the passive from the active interest rates for over a period of time, this is equal to the bank's revenue. And in Ecuador, the credits and deposits volume, so they differentiate substantially because as you can see, the deposits volume is higher than the credits, which shows us that the consumption in Ecuador is decreasing as well as people are saving more money.
Right. In 2007, the Ecuador government introduced the law of the maximum effective cost of credit. This allows the Central Bank of Ecuador to determine a price ceiling for the active interest rate. But how do they do that? Well, we made this chart to make it a little clearer. You have the final institution on this side. They provide central bank on a weekly basis a report of the money movement. So the central bank receive this and they do the measurements and they determine if it's necessary to take measure, if they need to change the height or to maintain it or they have to lower the rise. They report it back to the final institutions and the whole situation goes on and on and on to maintain a good price. As we all know, the active interest rate is very important for the final institution because that's where they get the revenue. However, there is a ceiling. They still try to match or be close to the ceiling to maximize the profit. And something that also is happening in Ecuador is the trust. So financial institutions, they sharpen their policy in providing credit to other people, and this will reduce consumption and investments in the country.
So we also have the second part, which is the passive interest rates. And the passive interest rates is conducted, as Dennis said already, as consumption decreases, people will spend less, which means that more money is just sitting at the bank. People having money at the bank in their debit or savings account, how you call it, means that the bank is paying them interest on that money just sitting there. So this is another burden for the bank, just paying the people for having money sitting there, and it's not really going anywhere for any investment projects. So this increased liquidity problem that the bank has is a major issue because the bank is sitting on lots amount of cash, but cannot motivate people to take out loans, take out credits, and actually work with that money. The government has tried to, the banks have tried to incentivize people to take out more loans and work with the money by decreasing these passive interest rates. However, that has not proven effective yet.
So to sum it up, Ecuadorian government relies highly on fiscal policy. So they increase their government spending by a lot in the hope that it will expand the economy. However, this only had a short-term effect, as we previously also saw with the temporary employment and other measures. And in the long term, it actually hurt the economy because it reduced the government's funds, and this forced them to increase taxes on their citizens. Hence, their purchasing power and income decrease and consumption decrease as well. The government has also been neglecting monetary policy, and many policies in place have actually not had a huge effect on the economy because of the fiscal policy is kind of contradictory. Currently, Ecuador is in a contractionary cycle that doesn't allow them to grow. On the other hand, we have the financial institutions, which right now are operating from a contingency perspective because they need to protect their assets. Because of the high liquidity in the market, the low demand for credits, and the low purchasing power of citizens, they've actually reduced the passive rates, as Kevin mentioned, and also they're being way more strict about to whom they give credits to. So Ecuador right now is in a disruptive cycle. This is why, to close this presentation, we wanted to give a humble recommendation from our perspective, which is to create stable policies focusing on monetary policy in order to utilize the high liquidity that's in the market through interest rates and credits. Our idea is going to create a domino effect in the economy, which will start with quality investment put into the country, which will then generate employment, increase the purchasing power and income of citizens. Hence, it will increase the consumption, and in theory, this will expand the economy. Thank you.
Have you guys heard of microfinance?
Yeah.
Is that being used in Ecuador?
So it's so heavily regulated there that microfinance doesn't have the largest presence. We haven't, in our research, found too much of it. Also, there's a lot of people who generally don't trust financial institutions, so that's why consumers haven't responded the way policymakers thought. So a lot of the savings continues to be just under the pillow, so to speak. People just tend to trust their own methods of saving money, even if rates continue to decrease, just because of historic instability and a lack of trust in the economy.
Also, with microfinance, the rates right now are pretty high, and the also like it goes to the trust as we mentioned, like people don't trust banks and also banks don't trust them because of all the financial and economic situation.
Well, we need to make sure that interest rates are low for the microfinance borrowers. Do you know how to make them lower?
The idea we had is like investment. Like if people start investing in the country, that will have an effect on the interest rates.
How about being a good person? Would that help in charge of lower rate?
In the long term, maybe, but it's going to take a lot of good person to develop that level of economic impact.
I think it also goes to the banking situation they had like in the 2000s. Like banks were trustworthy of people, and at some point people stopped paying loans. The bank had no money. They had the whole financial crisis. Like banks are like really not trustworthy.
Yeah, well, trust is important. You have Google up. I mean, good. When you Google this, microfinance.
WSJ.
Oh, not yet. That's gonna pull up. Microfinance, Buddhist. B-U-D-D. Buddhism?
Like the religion?
The religion, yes. Thailand. WSJ. Thailand is a developing economy, so if you click on that one, I can't see that. Sure.
Say that the key part of microfinance also.
I have to go before.
I guess. Put in mall. Put in a mall.
Oh, hold on.
M-O-N-K. You see, have you heard of the term
This one?
karma?
Oh, yeah,
Karma?
it's probably this one.
If you, yeah, you see that guy in the right hand?
Oh, what's happening?
You see that guy in the right hand side? That's a Buddhist monk, and he's also actually a financial advisor in Thailand. Now in Thailand they use Buddhism, right? So if you don't do drugs or smoke and all this other stuff that we do, and that some people do, right? Sorry. Then the interest rate's actually much lower for you. Does that make sense? So religion plays a factor, trust plays a factor, all this stuff comes into factor. So maybe microfinance may work in Ecuador, but maybe they can kind of take a piece of this model from Thailand. Just FYI, because interest rates, that's controlled pretty much by the US because they're using the dollar. So there's other ways to also create more lending, borrowing lending cycle in that economy that's not dependent on the dollar. Just want to mention that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.